Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing It Came From the Network. The topic of this It Came From the Network, WWF Armageddon 1999. This comes to us as a suggestion from Ryan Hadley. Thank you very much, Ryan. And he had mentioned that it's been a little while since we reviewed something WWE or WWF related, so here we go. We're jumping right into this. If you haven't seen my videos before, I grade everything on a 1 to 5 scale. 1 is the worst, 5 is the best. We get the first match of the evening, a tag team battle royal for the number 1 contendership for the tag team championship. We have the Dudley Boys going up against the Hardy Boys. Too Cool, the Headbangers, Edge and Christian, the Mean Street Posse, the Godfather and Mark Henry, and the Acolytes. Normally I'm a fan of battle royals. I think they're fun. I think they have a certain level of danger and unpredictability to them. This one kind of felt lumbering. It didn't feel like much was happening. It was a lot of kick and punches, which a lot of battle royals are. But when you look at the teams that are in this, the Hardys, the Dudleys, Too Cool, Headbangers, Edge and Christian, the Acolytes, these are some of the greatest tag teams of that generation. Even when the ring thinned out and there was just a few teams left and they had more space to do some of the more high-flying or electric or even rudimentary moves, it still stick to mostly kick-punch, which is okay. I don't mind that at times. It drug a little too long. There was a couple things I liked. The Mean Street Posse getting eliminated and coming back in, which was another thing. They only had one referee out there, so there were a couple times when it got down to the finish, Bradshaw and Jeff Hardy, or Matt Hardy, I believe, hit the ground at the same time, but the ref didn't see it, so he put him back in the ring. The ref's back was turned when Farouk went over the top rope and hit the ground, so he didn't see that. I know why they did that, to make it so there's a question that the Hardy Boys could have won it or should have won it. It ended up with the Acolytes winning the match. Again, I didn't think it was great. I think it could have been a lot better. I'm giving it a 3. Next up, we get a little promo segment with Kurt Angle, which leads us right into a match with Kurt Angle versus Steve Blackman. They had mentioned that Blackman cost him a tag team match against the Dudley Boys, thus setting it up, technically being for Kurt's first loss in the WWF or WWE, whichever you want to go. You're going to hear me interchange them. It was called WWF at the time, but now is known for 20 years as WWE, so just accept it. It's the same thing. That was Kurt's first loss, which he said it isn't a loss because Blackman's the one that took a pin. I love this era. I love Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle is one of the greats of all time, and I like Steve Blackman. I think here we hear a lot about how Kurt Angle took to wrestling quicker than almost anybody in the history of wrestling. You could see here some growing pains. And not that Steve Blackman was a bad wrestler, I just don't think he was a good enough wrestler to help lead the way for someone as inexperienced as Kurt Angle was. And, both these guys I've seen a lot better from. Not saying that this was a terrible match. The thing I thought was interesting, and I don't remember if this was the case, Kurt Angle wins with a bridging German suplex. I don't know if it's misremembering or if it was just for this match, but I thought he had always had the Olympic/Angle slam. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he did have that. If you remember differently, let me know in the comments. Did he use a German? I know he used the ankle lock later too, but I had always thought he had the Olympic slam even on his debut. Again, Angle does pick up the win. Afterwards, Blackman hits him with some nunchucks. I'm giving this one a 3. After that, we have a very young Michael Cole interviewing BB, who, if you don't remember, was in the WWF for a very short period of time. She played a nurse/emergency personnel that turned into a wrestler. Matter of fact, my cousin John, who I was sitting there watching this with, when he didn't remember at all, and he watched during this time as well. He's a person that grew up and watched wrestling in this era, so he didn't remember her at all even existing. I barely remember her. I think she was only there for less than 6 months. That interview led right into a match, an evening gown and a pool match, which again, we're going with the time here. We have Ivory versus Miss Jacqueline versus BB versus Miss Kitty. And Ivory is defending her women's championship in this match. The special guest referees are Moolah and Mae Young, because of course it is. Moolah and Mae Young were probably the most interesting thing about the women's division, other than the fact, and don't get me wrong, I do like and enjoy this. You got to see a lot of beautiful women, very scantily clad. For someone at 1999, I was 22. For someone that age, yeah, you're gonna like that. You're gonna enjoy that. That's why a lot of the fans went for this. Looking back at it now, and seeing where women's wrestling is now, does it feel subjectified? Does it feel like women were treated as just objects? Yeah, it definitely does. But it's a product of the era. I don't want to say it was 100% something terrible that was meant that way. It was just something that was always that way until years later when it started to change. Miss Kitty outlasts the rest of them. She picks up the win by keeping her evening gown on, and afterwards she disrobes, takes off the evening gown as a celebration, and we get the famous, she even takes off her bra, which I believe there's a miscue, but on the network, they blur it. She just shows, I'll put it in the most Jerry the King Lawler way possible. The kitty shows the puppies. It had to be a mistiming because Sergeant Slaughter was out there with a towel like a second late, and I remember seeing this live and be like, wow, that is insane. Now they have it edited. I don't know if they edited it for the VHS or the re-recordings or anything like that, because I never owned this as a VHS, but I do remember live, they were definitely shown. Again, Miss Kitty did pick up the win. It was a terrible booked match for everything I just talked about it. It was sloppy, it was messy, there's not much they could really do wrestling-wise, because what are you going to do when your goal is to take off their evening gown in a pool? You can't really do moves because you have the potential of drowning. You can't really sell because you can't lay down, you're going to drown. It was just kind of a mess. For all that, I'm giving that thing a 2. I thought it was just barely above unwatchable. Next up, we get an interview with Lillian Garcia and Val Venus. He's talking about a European 3-way title match that he's about to go into against Delo Brown and the British Bulldog. Bulldog was a European champion at the time. I thought this was a good match. I kind of expected better from the 3 participants here. I know this was towards the end of Bulldog's career, and he had kind of really slowed down. I don't know if this was before or after the injury to his back, which pretty much ended his career. I think it was. I think he had already left, went to WCW and came back at this point. But for whatever reason, these 3 just didn't click well together. I thought the match was good, don't get me wrong. Again, I love Delo and I love Val Venus. I love their work. Bulldog, I can talk days about how much I enjoy Bulldog. I just feel like there was something off. I would have rather seen a Delo Brown versus Val Venus solo match, or Delo versus Bulldog, or Val versus Bulldog, than this 3-way. Something about the 3 together, it never quite clicked. Val Venus does pick up the win after hitting the money shot, after Delo hit the lowdown on Bulldog. Then he hit the money shot on both of them and picked up the win. I'm giving this one a 3. It was good, just maybe my expectations were a little too high. Next up, we get an interview with XPac, who's talking about his upcoming match with Kane, and it's going to be a cage match where Kane can only win by pinfall or submission, whereas XPac can win if he escapes the cage as well. Talking about Tori, not Tori Wilson, the other Tori, who was Kane's girlfriend at the time. It's very weird. And they had just broken up. Kane and X-Pac were a team. I enjoyed this match. This is probably my second favorite match of the night, and it's not anything great. I mean, obviously I've seen much better matches from both of these guys, but it was fun. The story that was being told, Kane being the power guy, X-Pac being the speed, their dichotomy worked very well together. How they worked the match around, how X-Pac acted like a chicken at times, and Kane just was the big red monster still at the time. You had one of the things that I called it as soon as it happened, the Outlaws came up, the New Age Outlaws, and they helped X-Pac handcuff Kane to the cage, which as soon as they did, I knew, I was like, he's going to break that handcuffs. I kind of remembered that, but it's obvious when you got Kane in there. He's done stuff like that over and over again. He's broken into cages, he's broken handcuffs, he's done things that no mortal man should be able to do because he has powers, of course. This is a really fun match. Kane does pick up the win here. I'm giving this one a 4. I rather enjoyed that. I liked it. It felt with the time. This is the kind of thing that made the WWE and made the Attitude Era so much fun. You had characters like Kane and XPac interacting with each other, and you can love both of them, and you can love matches they have. Just so much fun and so enjoyable in my opinion. Now going after that, we get for the Intercontinental Championship, China is defending against Chris Jericho in his Y2J iteration. This one was pretty sloppy, and I don't want to talk bad about China and that since she's passed, but yeah, it's watching it back and watching her wrestle now, especially in someone as skilled as Chris Jericho is, and I don't know, maybe they just didn't click with each other, they didn't work well with each other. I seem to remember her being better than this. She felt very clunky, very awkward, almost like this was her first wrestling match, where at the time I know it definitely wasn't, and it wasn't even her first match with Jericho. It just felt like she was moving slow, she was out of place a lot of times, she felt very clunky, very out of order on some of the moves. Jericho, for his part, felt like he was leading the match, but he couldn't get it to get where he needed it to be. Overall, not a great match. Chris Jericho does pick up the win with the Walls of Jericho. I'm giving this one a 2, and the thing I enjoyed actually most happened after the match. Chris Jericho is being interviewed in the back, and China and Miss Kitty, who at the time was China's, I guess, valet / clone. She was going with the China look and dressing and looking like China. They come back and China offers to shake his hand, which Jericho plays off extremely well. Jericho made it a good segment. He does eventually shake her hand and then kind of does a thing about challenging her while she's walking away, which very Chris Jericho, very entertaining. But the match itself, kind of bad. Next up, we see some of the most iconic people in the Attitude Era, Mankind and The Rock and Sock Connection, going up against the badass Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg Jesse James, aka the New Age Outlaws. I was kind of surprised we didn't get the full New Age Outlaw entrance. They did the talking themselves to the rings, but they didn't do the whole ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. And I could recite the whole shtick, but I'm not going to. You all know it. Everybody watching this knows that shtick. This was a spectacle. Match quality wise, I wouldn't say it's the greatest match quality, but for what we have involved and how entertaining all 4 of these guys are, it really made the match interesting. You know, the Outlaws were defending their tag titles against the Rock and Sock. Mick and the Rock always had great chemistry, whether it would be as a team or as opponents. The New Age Outlaws, kind of underrated as a tag team. People look back and they'll say the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, and the Hardys were the 3 greatest teams of this era, but the Outlaws are right up there with them. Matter of fact, during this match, Jim Ross even says that they could possibly be the greatest WWE tag team of all time, which they definitely have the accolades for to be up there in the conversation. I just don't think that they get brought up as much. And maybe it's because they're not as flashy as the Hardys or Edge and Christian. They're not as humorous as Edge and Christian or as violent as the Dudleys or the Acolytes were. But they were a great all-around team, in my opinion. This match was really fun. The Rock and Sock pick up the win when Al Snow comes out and causes a disqualification. There's a whole thing where Al had turned on Mick Foley because of what he had wrote in his book and kind of mocking Al Snow a lot in the book, and they're good friends, so it's all in kayfabe. I thought this was really fun. It was very enjoyable for me. If you're not from this era, you might not enjoy it as much, but to understand it, just watch the match and listen to the crowd reactions to everybody, and you'll understand just how enjoyable this is and how much fun it was, even to this day. And this might just be nostalgia, it's still a fun match to watch. I'm giving this one a 4. I thought it was rather good. Next up, we get a match for the WWF World Championship. The Big Show is defending against the Big Boss Man. This was coming off the feud where Big Boss Man and Big Show were feuding because of Boss Man saying a lot of inappropriate stuff about Big Show's father, who had just passed away. Yeah, it's that angle. And I know it's been brought up on WrestleCrap. I know people destroy this angle for being bad, but I'm sorry, I enjoyed it. I thought it was hilarious. I always knew it was somewhat tongue-in-cheek. I mean, they brought out the Blues Brothers cop car for the Big Show, or not the Big Show, for the Boss Man to drive while he was dragging the casket. They show all these highlights there. And I always thought it was hilarious. I thought it was a great part of what WWF was doing at the time, or WWE was doing at the time. And I always really took it as tongue-in-cheek. I took it as that way, and I think that's how it was meant to be taken. A lot of people took it as a serious thing and didn't take it the way I do and kind of hate it. I enjoyed it. Now the match, not so much. This was about a 3-minute or so match where Big Show mostly dominates, even though Boss Man has Albert with him, Prince Albert at the time. Big Show does pick up the win in a pretty quick match. I will say, and this was again, I watched it with my cousin John and his wife Samantha. John says to me, Big Show at one point kicks up, and he's like, I didn't remember he did that, which, if you kind of remember from back in the day, Big Show was a lot more active than he would be even a couple of years later. He was doing kip-ups, he was doing drop kicks off the top rope. He kind of slowed that down a bit when, I believe, after he got sent to OVW to lose some weight, and they kind of taught him how to work as a big man, he kind of took that out of the repertoire, which I kind of enjoy that he did, because even the guy I'm wearing on my shirt, Andre, he had some mobility back in the 70s. If you're not familiar, go check some of that stuff out. But he never really tried to keep up with guys on a activity rate. Like, he was always using his size as a dominant feature, which is what Show should have done, and which is what he did here. Big Show did pick up the win. I'm giving it, for the match itself, was a bunch of nothing, really, kind of bad. I'm giving it a 2. Now, last but not least, in a no-holds-barred match for Stephanie McMahon, either getting a divorce for Triple H or staying with Triple H, Vince McMahon going up against Triple H. And again, this is another thing that a lot of people point at and say is goofy. Maybe I'm the target demographic for this. But I thought the Triple H marrying Stephanie stuff was hilarious. I thought it was great at the time. I still think of it very fondly. It could be nostalgic eyes watching it, but I like it. I enjoyed it. This match, and I mentioned this, I keep referencing him, and he's probably going to watch this and comment. I mentioned to my cousin John, I said, this is where WWE did better than WCW. WCW, on the straight-up matches, like match-to-match quality, their matches were better, but when we got into the hardcore stuff, WWE was better. This is where WWE shined, when it was chaotic, when it was outside of the ring, going all over the building. And they didn't do it as good as ECW, because ECW was the preeminent source of extreme or hardcore wrestling. But WWE did it light years better than WCW. WCW felt corny when they would do hardcore matches or no-holds-barred matches or no-rule matches. Whereas WWE, they would be the best shows of the night. If you look on here, the cage match, this match, they're two of my favorite shows of the card. Whereas on the other end, if they had two hardcore matches, they'd probably be two of my least favorite matches on the card. Just saying, as a comparison between the two. Would I rather watch Mysterio versus Malenko than most of the matches on this card? Heck yeah, I would. But if you're going to give me Vince McMahon versus Triple H in a no-holds-barred match where it's just absolute lunacy and they're beating each other with wrenches and hammers and trash cans and getting suplexes and body slams on top of limousines, getting smashed into a vending machine, yeah, I'm going to enjoy this as well. This is very enjoyable, very fun. Obviously, Vince McMahon is not Kurt Angle. He's not, Dean Malenko. He's Vince McMahon. He's not the greatest wrestler, but he makes up for it in his damn toughness. I mean, the guy was insane. This is a rather famous match because we get to the end, Triple H does pick up the win. He looks like he's going to bash Vince McMahon with the hammer, or Vince looks like he's going to bash Triple H with the hammer. Stephanie comes in, asks Vince if she can do it. She chickens out, ends up costing Vince a match. Afterwards, she comes in the ring to stop Triple H from bashing Vince with the hammer, only to turn around and give a devilish smile, or a sly smile. Devilish, I guarantee that's what Jim Ross said. I don't know for a fact, but that's probably what came in my head. I could hear him saying it. She turns around, smiles, hugs Triple H, and this was the beginning of the McMahon-Helmsley era. I really enjoyed this match. I thought it was so fun, so enjoyable. and just what you would expect from WWE at the time, I'm giving this one a 4. I thought it was really fun. Again, this and the cage match, probably my two favorite matches, the Rock and Sock and Outlaws match. I enjoyed that too. But I would say this was probably my favorite match of the night, followed by the cage match, then the Rock and Sock versus the New Age Outlaws. All pretty good. Overall, the card was very up and down, some bad stuff. The 3 matches I just mentioned were rather good. Most of it a little bit in the middle of the ground. I'm going to give this one the benefit of the doubt, though. I'm going to give this one a 3. The 3 matches that were good, that were my 3 favorites, they didn't really make up for the overall malaise of the rest of the show, where everything was very, I don't know, not bad, not good, just there. And there were a couple matches that were actually just terrible, in my opinion, not good matches at all. So for that, I can't give it much more than a 3. I will say, for the 3 matches that I really like, I definitely recommend going back and watching those 3 matches. They're definitely something, if you're a fan of the Attitude Era or you want to know about the Attitude Era, check these out. These are 3 great examples of what made the Attitude Era special. And one thing I did want to mention before I get off of this video, you may have seen it on the thumbnail, all of the promotional paperwork and all the promotional posters, everything, has The Undertaker on it. But he's nowhere to be found here. I don't remember if he was injured or what the case was with that, but it's a little bit of a bait and switch. Just saying, if you clicked on this expecting to see something about The Undertaker, I'm sorry. I'm just using their promotional work to help promote this. Anyway, with all that being said, once again, thank you, Ryan, for your suggestion. If you have a suggestion for me that you want to see, leave it down here in the comments. Let me know. More often than not, I'm going to be able to get to it and I'm going to do your suggestions. I appreciate that. Not only does it help me when I'm trying to think of something to review, but it also lets me know what you want to see me review. So again, if you have a suggestion, put it down here. I may not get to it right away if I have something else planned, but I will eventually get to it, hopefully. With all that being said, let's smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. And if you made it all the way to the end, give me Triple H in the comments. My name is George Coles, and this has been another It Came From the Network.